Now, in a highly controversial statement following the recent rioting, Christopher Steele, the former head of the Russian desk of MI6, sensationally claims that intelligence services want to investigate whether Tommy Robinson and Reform MP Nigel Farage have the backing of Vladimir Putin. Both figures have faced criticism with regards to the recent rioting and have been accused of potential incitement. But Steele states that MI5 will be looking into things like their travel movements and also monetary transfers. Now, if this action is taken by MI5, it could be in the breach of the Wilson Doctrine, a convention which obstructs the ability of the police and security services from tapping phones of the members of the House of Commons and the House of Lords. An astonishing story. And joining me now to discuss this is Chris Phillips, the former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Chris, always a delight to have you on the show. I find this story simply astonishing. The baseless allegation, the inference that this may extend to Nigel Farage, dragged into the web once again of Vladimir Putin, Russian influence, and allegations have been thrown at Nigel Farage time and time again with no proof thus far. Tell me, what do you think about this astonishing attack?
Well, I think it's a load of rubbish, to be honest, Martin. I think it's probably the Mail trying to get some headlines. Christopher Steele probably asked for a comment on all this and probably offhand mentioned something along these lines that people will be looked into. And I think it's a story of nothing, Martin, to be quite honest. Tommy Robinson will be monitored. There's no doubt about that. He's considered a bit of a problem and criminal to some. But Nigel's not said anything, I don't think, that would cause any issues with regard to this.
But, Chris, isn't the clear indication here that put these people in the same Venn diagram, Tommy Robinson, Vladimir Putin, Nigel Farage, the inference, the smear is that they're basically the same animal. That's what this is doing. And as for Christopher Steele saying that Nigel Farage is, quotes, an instigator of the recent riots, that, to me, is borderline defamatory.
I think it is defamatory, and if I was Nigel, I'd be speaking to my solicitors. Yeah, you know, we've got a load of misinformation and nonsense going on at the moment because both parties, neither party, actually want to deal with a problem that 60% of the 70% of the population feel, and there's a lot of misinformation flying about. And I think Nigel is probably, you know, I think this talk about hard right, hard left. This is, you know, there's an awful lot of people in the country that are really concerned about immigration. Both parties know that, and they're both trying to throw some muck around. And, of course, Nigel's the one that's going to get it.
And, Chris, it's worth pointing out, of course, that this conversation with Christopher Steele took place on Times Radio. It's gone out. It's now out there. And isn't this just the same old story? These allegations are thrown out. There's no proof of the allegation. But the process, the punishment is that people believe it. The smoke and the mirrors sticks. And there's no validation for it. There's no factual analysis, but it's just thrown out there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a very simple thing to do, and it's throw out loads of allegations without ever backing them up. And, you know, even Boris, if you think about Boris' early days, he was supposed to have been a Russian insider, and yet he was the one that was very much in support of Ukraine. So, you know, we know these things happen, that they throw the mud out to try and get some, as you say, an inference that someone's up to no good when it's complete nonsense.
OK, Chris Phillips, the former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Thanks for joining us. And I'm still joined in the studio by GBNews' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, and the former Conservative MP, Daniel Kaczynski. Daniel, could I start with you? I know before we started, you said you have some pretty robust opinions on this. Fire away.
Well, I think if somebody with the former position of Mr. Steele is going to be making these sort of aspersions and casting these sort of allegations about Nigel Farage, he's got to be extremely careful, and he's got to make sure he has evidence. And we saw what happened, and you've referred to him, Aaron Banks. He took the Guardian newspaper journalist to court and won. She was found out to have just sprayed these allegations without any evidence, and she had to pay a very hefty fine. I very much hope that Nigel Farage does take action against Mr. Steele, because it's very, very damaging for the body politic. Somebody actually suggesting that what it infers is that you are betraying your country. Because at this stage, anybody with any tangential links to Putin is working in a counterintuitive way to the interests of the United Kingdom. It's a very serious allegation.
And Daniel, even more astonishing because, of course, Nigel Farage is now a sitting member of Parliament. That wasn't the case before. Nigel, for those who might not be aware of who this individual is, Christopher Steele, who is this fella?
He used to run the Russia desk at MI6, so he was quite a senior spook in his day. He then went off to a private intelligence company where he now is. And if you remember, he was responsible for the controversial dossier on Donald Trump in Russia, which caused all sorts of fuss because that none of the allegations in that turned out to be provable. So here we are again with a number of allegations being thrown around. You mentioned the Wilson doctrine. Should MI5 ever need to investigate a member of Parliament, has to be signed off by the Home Secretary and, most importantly, the Prime Minister. The idea that Keir Starmer would authorise an investigation into Nigel Farage with absolutely no evidence at all is just for the birds.
So that won't happen. But nevertheless, the allegation is thrown out there. Social media will do its thing. You know, the truth won't even have its trousers on before this has gone all around the world as fact. And as you pointed out, those allegations, which were used politically, ostensibly, and methodically for a long time against Donald Trump in America, were proven to be completely baseless. And it feels like this is a similar thing, a politically motivated attack. Do you think that idea has legs?
Well, it seems to. I mean, the whole thing just seems to be, as we heard from Chris a second ago, it just seems to be nonsense because it is certainly true MI5 would looked at Tommy Robinson, not least because of his links with the English Defence League 10 years ago. They would have certainly looked at that. National Action was banned as a terrorist organisation, so that was the work of MI5. So, yes, they look at far-right people and far-right groups. What they don't do is look at sitting members of Parliament unless there is huge evidence that they're doing something on behalf of a foreign power.
And Daniel, as Nigel said, that's pretty unlikely. They would actually get the rubber stamp of the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary. But does it even need that? Does it even need the official acknowledgement? Because, as I just said, people will think, once again, here we go. Putin's got his claws into Nigel Farage. Once again, always in the same Venn diagram as Tommy Robinson. All of this is designed, is it not, to tarnish by association?
Well, I mean, of course, on the one hand, we have increasing evidence that President Putin is trying to, in a malign way, influence elections in Western European countries and try to influence and hack into databases, on the one hand. On the other hand, there is no evidence whatsoever that has been presented linking Mr. Farage to Putin or any of his operators. So the conduct of Mr. Steele, I agree with everybody who has spoken so far, very, very damaging to the overall integrity of Parliament and parliamentarians to make these sort of allegations without a scintilla, without a shred of evidence.
And as you say, maybe he'll be getting a nice legal letter in the post. Daniel, Nigel, thank you for your opinions. Superb as ever. Now,